All right, well, it is 3 o'clock. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Product Photography. My name is Caden, and I will be assisted by my chat facilitator, Brittany, today. Please say hi, Brittany.
Hello, hello.
So just some ground rules before we get started. Your mics have been muted on purpose. If you have program-related questions you would like to ask, please do so in chat, which can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Your text will only be seen by panelists, not all attendees. Any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this virtual program. We will try to answer the questions as we go along, but there will be some time for Q&A after the lesson is over. Today, we will be covering how to set up, shoot, and then edit product photos. This class is bordering on a beginning to intermediate level, so we will not go into extreme detail about camera settings, technical aspects, or tools. If you find yourself lost, a recording will be sent out of this program and recommended tutorials will be displayed at the end of class. We will be using Adobe Photoshop to edit photos, but there are some free alternatives such as Photopea if you do not have access to Photoshop. Currently, Haggard, Davis, and Harrington are offering computer reservations on a computer with Adobe Creative Cloud by appointment only, so you can edit your photos for free at either of those locations. I will have some exercise files posted in the chat if you have Photoshop at home and wish to follow along. So let's get started. So of course, we're going to be talking about product photography today. A quick class overview. We're going to discuss setting up the shot and the supplies that you will need. We're going to be talking about what you will need by means of lighting and also how to photo edit with Photoshop. So setting up the shot, just in a brief overview of what we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about DSLR cameras and smartphone cameras. You can use either. And we're going to discuss the difference between those two. There is different kinds of lighting. So we have natural light and artificial light. Natural light is sometimes better because you have it for free, but artificial is sometimes better when it comes to setting up the shot and making sure the shot looks great. I recommend 2 or 3 point lighting, and we're going to go more into detail of what that means later. And of course, diffusing your light so it's not super harsh, usually just with a blanket or a bed sheet or a shower curtain. I recommend that you have a background. Sometimes a white bed sheet, a piece of paper is good. Other interesting materials can also make your shot more interesting. So let's go more specifically into our cameras. So DSLR stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. And some of the pros are that it has superior photo quality. So you're working with more pixels. So when you blow up that shot, it's going to look great and not super grainy. But some of the cons is that it is pretty expensive to get a DSLR and they can come with pretty steep learning curves. I've only used a DSLR maybe once or twice, and it was pretty tricky for me to try and use. Smartphones are awesome to have because you always have them with you, and they are pretty easy to use by means of your phone camera. You probably already know how to take shots on your phone, but one downside is that it lacks the quality that a DSLR has. So when you blow up those photos, sometimes they look a little grainy. You're not working with as many pixels, although some phone cameras have gotten really good with their quality. They aren't quite to the DSLR level yet. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about lighting. So I mentioned before, so natural lighting is free to use if you have some windows, but I would recommend shooting your windows with diffused light. That just means that it's not direct sunlight. If you shoot in direct sunlight, you can get some really harsh shadows and some lines across your photos, and you cannot fix lighting in post. So making sure that you have some softer light, you can diffuse it with like a shower curtain, a piece of paper, or a bed sheet, preferably white if you're going to keep that light as neutral as you can, but you can also get kind of fun with it and use colored diffusers if you want to change up what that lighting looks like. There's also, of course, artificial lighting. 2 to 3 point lighting is best, and we'll discuss more what that means in a minute. You can also try out various lamps in your home. So if you have like a desk lamp that's adjustable, that's perfect because you can adjust how direct your light is pointing at your object. And you can experiment with the different bulbs. So as you see in this picture, some lights are more yellow and some are more blue. So more fluorescent bulbs are going to be bluer, and those other bulbs are going to be more yellow, and that is going to affect how your photo looks. So like I mentioned before, I would recommend having a background. You can use like a white bed sheet or a piece of paper like we used in this photo. Notice that there are no folds or creases on that photo to the right. We want to make sure that background is as seamless as possible, and we don't want any creases to make it look weird. And so you can also try using different materials. If you don't want to use something more plain, you can shoot it up against like stones or bark or more textured fabric rather than this plain sheet. But this is just an example of like a home setup with a desk lamp and some cardboard boxes. There's also a light box there and a bed sheet. And this is the more professional office setup. This was done at Parr Library using some of our lighting equipment that we have and a DSLR and some butcher paper. We actually liked the butcher paper a bit better than the bed sheet because you might have noticed the bed sheet had a couple wrinkles in it, but that butcher paper was really seamless and wrinkle-free, so it made it look a lot nicer. A thick white canvas would also work, or you can also use colored butcher paper to spruce up your pictures a little bit. So as you can see from these pictures, it's pretty flawless. There's no wrinkles. As you can see in that little picture inside the DSLR, it looks pretty great. And then this is just another picture that we took of a watch. And you can see we tried that white butcher paper, but it was kind of boring and it had a couple shadows and we just weren't a fan of it. So we tried it with some complementary fabrics like that green fabric off to the right, and it really made the brown leather on that watch pop. So we also tried wrapping it around some burlap to see what it would look like when it was clasped, and it looks pretty great. So you can just always experiment with the fabrics and the objects that you have at home whenever you're taking pictures of your products, especially if you're going to go sell them. Okay, so more on lighting. This is 2- and 3-point lighting. As you can see, they're pretty self-explanatory. Your 2-point lighting is going to come from 2 different sources, and your 3-point lighting is going to come from 3 different sources. We recommend that your 2-point lighting be from opposite directions, but not complete opposites because then it casts some weird shadows. And then your 3-point lighting, you're normally going to have a key light, which is near your camera, a backlight, which is coming from behind the product, and then a fill light, which is coming from the other side of the key light. Here's an example of some 2-point lighting. So the picture on the left is going to be your 1-point lighting. You can see it casts that pretty harsh shadow, which can be kind of artsy, but it's not really showing an accurate depiction of what the mannequin looks like. So you want to get that 2-point lighting like you see on the right-hand side so you can see the object a bit more clearly. And you can also see that there's 2 shadows on that 2-point lighting. They're very faint, but you can sort of see that there are 2, and they are softened by that other light. And here's an example of some 3-point lighting. So you can see the 1-point lighting, you see some harsh shadows along the right-hand side, and it's very bright along the left. And you don't really get a very good image of what the front of those binoculars look like. The 2-point lighting, it's a bit better. There are still some shadows along the backside of the binoculars, but you can see the front of them a lot better. And then, of course, the 3-point lighting takes away a lot of that lighting from those shadows from the backhand side, and it really makes that front of the binoculars pop. The white bar in front of the triangle facing the binoculars on the 3-point one represents a diffuser. So the light was really bright and reflecting in that was causing a glare in the binoculars. So we put a diffuser in front of it so it wasn't as harsh. So taking pictures of reflective surfaces is very hard. So make sure that you put a diffuser or maybe try some indirect lighting so you're not catching that glare in those reflective surfaces. All right, and then this was the lighting with the DSLR. You can see it's a lot clearer, but especially it's underexposed in that first 1-point picture. You can't really see the front of those binoculars very well. The 2-point is better, and then the 3-point looks the best with the front of those binoculars really popping out. Okay, I'm going to exit this PowerPoint, and we are going to get into the editing portion of this class. Okay, so I'm going to pull up Photoshop. Your front screen is probably going to look a lot like this. And you should have some exercise files shared with you now in our chat. I'm going to pull up our first one. We're going to do our phone photos first. I'm going to find those photos. And I'm going to do this picture of this mannequin first. So you can open it up by selecting, and it should pop up shortly. It's just going to take a minute to load. There it is. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop out this bottom half because it looks different and I don't really want that there. So you're going to come along the left-hand side to this little frame, and it's a crop tool. And there's a couple of things that you can do here. You can click and you can drag, or you can come up here to this pane and you can type the dimensions that you want. So I want a 5x7, and it's going to look a lot like that. Let me see if I can get rid of this panel. I don't know how to get rid of this. I'm going to just drag this down a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to click 5x7, and then there should be a little check mark, if I'm not mistaken, that will allow you to keep what you're doing. I'm going to click enter, and then I'm going to close out of this crop tool. Okay, I'm going to go back to the crop tool and sort of, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. Control Z to undo what you just did. And we're going to go with that for now. Okay. So I have a lot of wrinkles on this sheet. So what we're going to do now is we're going to clone stamp. So it's going to be this little stamp tool over here. We're going to grab this. And the first thing you're going to do is Alt click. And that's going to take from where you want. So I want to take from this clear, unwrinkled white area. So Alt click. And then I'm going to get rid of some of these wrinkles over here. And I'm just going to click and drag. Okay, so you see it's causing little tiny circles and it's making it look pretty weird. So I'm going to come up here to where this little circle is, and I'm going to increase the size so it looks a little better. So now you see my cursor is a bit bigger. That's a lot better. I'm going to just sort of block all of this out, get rid of some of these wrinkles. Oh, didn't want to do that. Control Z. Be careful not to get what you're photographing. Okay, so that looks a bit better. So we could do some color editing. It's not very necessary. It looks pretty good. So I'm just going to Control Save, which is Control S. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. File, or you can come over here and go File, Save. And maybe it is what I wanted. Okay, so this is your quality format. So it's a high quality right now, 8 bits, and it's a somewhat large file, but it's going to be standard, and that's good. We're going to click OK, and that's saved. Okay. I'm going to open a new file, and we're going to edit our binoculars. So we're going to do let's do our 3-point binoculars. Okay, so this is pretty big. I'm going to crop this a little bit. It went back to my 5x7. If you want it to be landscape rather than portrait, you can come to these arrows up here and swap. So now it's the correct size. I'm going to drag this over so our image is centered. There we go. And then up here, there's a little check mark. we can click that. I'm going to close out of this. Okay. So I'm going to use our lasso tool because this sheet isn't very white. So over here, this little lasso, I'm going to lasso this entire binoculars, and whoops, hold on, Control Z. I'm not very precise when it comes to getting really close to the object, so I'm just going to do the best that I can with the mouse that I have. Just sort of come all the way around. And of course, the closer you are to these binoculars, the better it's going to look. But I'm just dealing with a mouse right now, so it's going to be a little difficult. Okay, so we selected our binoculars. So we're going to right click and we're going to do, oh, there should be a select inverse. Where's select in? Here it is, select inverse. So now all of this white area is now selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to go to adjustments, brightness, and I'm going to increase the brightness. So it looks a little bit whiter now. You see how that harsh edge is there though? If you get closer to the binoculars, that's not going to happen. But we're going to increase our brightness just a little bit. And then we're done. So we're going to come back over here. I'm going to try clone stamping it out because I'm a bit better with the clone stamping tool than I am with the lasso tool. So we're going to remember Alt click to pull from this area. And then we're going to just sort of rough or lightly go over these edges to make it look a little bit cleaner. Now remember, if it goes over your picture, it's going to turn it to the color of that picture. So you want to make sure that you're going to Alt click somewhere else before you retouch up other areas. Also, I went really high. So now if I come up here, it's going to be off the page. So I have to Alt click again before I come over and I fix these corners. See, it went off the screen again. I'm going to Alt click and try this again. There we go. Yeah, that looks much better now. Okay. You can also do color editing over here. Under adjustments, we have a little color balance. This looks pretty good to me, but maybe I think it's a little too yellow. I can move this little color scale over to make it a little bit more blue, but I don't really like the way that looks. So let me just do maybe +2 blue. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. See how it took some of those yellow highlights out? So now it looks like I shot it in fluorescent lighting rather than just regular yellow lighting. All right, I'm also going to do under this one, under this selection, I'm going to try and do, actually, I think that's good for this photo. Let's move on to our DSLR photos. So I'm going to file open and I'm going to come back here. Let's try another one of our binoculars. I've got a bunch of pictures here, but you should just have this one. You see how blue this one looks? So we're going to come over to our adjustments like we did before and do our color balance, and we're going to move it way over to the yellow. Maybe not way over, but let's do like 50. That way it takes out a lot of that harsh blueness and it looks more like the silver that this is supposed to be. You can also come over here and do our hue saturation to give it a little hue. You can make it a more green color, a more yellow color, whatever you like. See how it's in the blues right now? You can put it in yellow and then up the lightness. That's going to make it look really bright though. So let's turn down the saturation a lot. And that's just going to give us a little bit of a yellow undertone. Okay. So I don't think any background editing is needed for this. It looks pretty good the way it is. So let's go to another one. I'm going to open up this one. Okay, this looks pretty yellow. So what I'm going to do, well, first I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to adjustments because this is still very blue. I shot it with the DSLR and so it looks, the lighting just looked very blue. So we're going to put it at about somewhere in the 50s or 40s. Let's do 51. But now this looks extra yellow. So we're going to come over here to our lasso tool and we're going to select this little highlight right here. And we're going to make it a little bit more blue. You see how it's going down? All right. I'm going to leave it at that. I think a plus 40 is fine. Okay. We're going to come back over to the entire selection. And so there's a couple different things that you can do when it comes to affecting the lightness of your photos. You can do brightness, turn the brightness way up, turn it way down. You can tell it gets really blue. That's because the lighting was very blue. There's also, let me go back to 0. There's also exposure. So exposure is normally what you have to adjust when you're taking the picture. It's the amount of light you're letting into the camera lens, but you can also fix it in post. So you can see if you increase the exposure, it gets a lot brighter. If you decrease the exposure, it gets a lot darker. Although it's going to a black instead of a blue because the exposure is the amount of light you're letting in, and it's not affected by the light that you have in the room. All right. I'm going to reset that to 0. And I think that this picture looks pretty good. So I'm going to move on to one of our watch pictures. Let's do this number 5 one on a dark screen. So I already sort of discussed exposure and brightness, but we definitely want to turn up the brightness on this. I prefer to use brightness rather than exposure just because it keeps a lot of the color. Exposure has a heavier bias to highlight tones, and brightness has no bias and affects all tones equally. So I'm going to just turn up that brightness and look at how much clearer that image is already. I'm also going to desaturate. So let me find desaturation. So it's not as vibrant because it's making this look very, very bright brown, and that watch was not that bright brown. So I'm going to desaturate it a little bit to about this point. That's a more accurate color that was given to this watch. Okay. Let's try another photo. I want to do the one on the burlap. Okay, so when you're taking a picture with a DSLR, it also has this nice portrait effect. You may have used portrait mode on your phone where it blurs sort of the outside that's not in focus. And I like that it did that. So I'm going to just leave that. But I'm going to desaturate this just a little bit, just a twinge, to make it that more accurate brown. There's a lot of fuzz over here, so I'm going to try and clone stamp the fuzz away. So let me Alt click, and I'm just going to sort of drag over this. I might need to make it a little bit more specific. If your size is too big, it may not work very well. So I'm just going to decrease the size, Alt click again. No, that's not what I want to do. That's Windows. Alt click and get rid of some of this fuzz. It's not really doing what I want it to do. And sometimes that happens with Photoshop. It makes it a bit difficult to work with, but you know what? It's okay. Let me try increasing the hardness. And that's not working either. Okay, well, let's try with this one really fast. That's also Windows. Okay, hold on. Okay, so that's working a little bit. It's making that one go a little bit away. And I really want to make sure that the focal point is right on the clock face. So I want to make sure that it's centered. I'm going to crop it just a little bit and center it. That's not what I wanted to do. Control Z. Make sure that your selection tool is on when you crop. That's also not what I wanted to do. Okay. And you see that it's pretty much in the center. So we like that. So we are going to go back to our selection tool, exit out of crop, and we would save this as is. I'm going to go to our painting. So this is just an example of how to photograph art. It's difficult to get pictures of paintings without glares, so I just want you to play with diffusers and some distant lights to increase ISO on your camera until you can get one that works. They did a top-down approach for this picture, but I think next time we should prop it up against the wall and try it that way instead, because this way, if you have that lighting from above, it really gets a harsh glare. But adding extra bits like brushes and twine adds some flavor to your picture, but it also makes it a bit more difficult for people to steal your art and claim it as their own. So we're going to crop. And no, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on, Control Z. So we're cropping and we're going to move this so it's more in the center. There we go. And then let's get it mostly in frame. We just want to take a picture of the painting. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit. That looks good to me. So I'm going to click the check mark. Okay. So it's now a little dark without the bright white background. So I'm going to come over to adjustments and increase the brightness a little bit. Okay, not too much, but that looks a lot better. And then color removal. So I'm going to get my lasso tool. This area right here is pretty yellow. So I'm going to lasso this as best as I can. And go to adjustments and go to color balance. We're going to increase the blue just a little bit. You see how that yellow is sort of going away? Now, if I go too much, it gives you a bright blue streak, and you don't want that. So we're just going to do just about 13. You can't really see the edges, and it looks good. If you want the edges to be lighter, whenever you lasso, you can click feather. So let me show an example of that. I'm going to circle this white area up here. I'm going to right click and click feather. And it's going to feather, I'm going to do about 10. And that's going to make those harsh edges sort of go away a little bit more. So I'm going to come to adjustments and decrease the brightness of that area. You see how it sort of like blends into the background a little bit more? I'm just going to decrease it about 6, just so it's not a harsh of a glare. I'm going to do the same thing over here. There's a pretty harsh glare over here on this little white area. I'm just going to decrease the brightness just a twinge. Oh, wait. Hold on. Make sure that you always come back into adjustments and select, or else it's just going to keep decreasing the brightness of the previous area you selected. So I'm going to decrease the brightness a little bit. And that's a little too much. I'd say that looks better. Okay, All right. I think I'm done with this one. Before I get into our next image, do we have any questions in the chat, Brittany?
We had one about the cost of Photoshop, and I answered it in the Q&A.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I don't know that off the top of my head, so I appreciate that. Okay. So let's take a look at this photo. We are going to take the glare out of the upper left corner. There's kind of a glare over here, but it's also pretty dark. So let me go to adjustments and increase the brightness just a smidge. See, now that glare is a bit more obvious, but you can also see everything a bit clearer. So I'm going to use my lasso tool, come over here, and I'm going to circle this area where this glare is. I'm going to feather it about 10, and I'm going to decrease the brightness just a smidge to try and take out that glare. Maybe try and color balance it too, add a bit more blue. I'm adding blue to the whole thing. Hold on, I gotta re-lasso it. Let me get it back to 0. You can also just select in here and type what you want. Okay, so let me re-lasso this up here.
We do have a question in the chat whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do this really fast and then I will answer that question right away. I am going to make this a little bit more blue. Okay, what's that question?
So it's about the photography part that you covered earlier.
Okay.
They're asking, what did you use for a diffuser and how? And does it need to be attached to a light you're using or just in front of it?
So it just has to be in front of it. Preferably, it helps if it's attached just to help direct where that light is going. But definitely make sure that it's not directly on the bulb. We used, I believe, a piece of printer paper as a diffuser, but you want to definitely make sure that it's not touching the bulb because that could be a fire hazard. You can also use like a bed sheet, you can use a pillowcase, you can use a shower curtain, I think is very popular. A shower curtain is very similar to the material that we used in our studio lighting, those clear looking umbrellas. But I think for the pictures that we took in the home setup, we just used a piece of printer paper in front of that light source. But again, definitely make sure that it's not touching, or else some fire hazards could go off. Okay, and then I think I'm also going to do an overall color edit for this because it is looking a little on the blue side. So I'm going to just make it a little bit more yellow. And that looks good. Okay, I'm going to show you how to export. You're going to come up here to File, Export, and then you can export as whatever you want. If it's going to be, I think PNG is preferred just because it works the best. It allows for white backgrounds if you're going to have a transparent background, and it stands for Portable Network Graphics, and it's better than JPEG essentially. So you can save it wherever you want it. I'm going to save it to my desktop, save, and then it's been exported. You can't save files traditionally on Photoshop. If you save it, it's going to just save it as a, it's going to ask you if you want to save it to your Creative Cloud or on your computer. But it's going to save as a Photoshop file. It's not going to save as like a PNG or a JPEG. So you're going to want to make sure that if you're ready to use this picture, you're going to go to File and you're going to export. Okay, looks like we still have a bunch of time. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to keep editing. Keep those questions rolling in if you have any. But those are all of the ones I had for that. Let me go back to the binoculars. And let's do this up close one. Okay, again, very, very blue. So we're going to come to our adjustments, color scale, and go a little bit more yellow. You see, whenever we go yellow, we get those yellow glares on the sides. So I'm going to just go mostly yellow and then get our lasso tool, sort of select Oh, hold on. Control Z. I went a little too wide there.
We do have another question, Kaden, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, awesome. Let me hear it.
Oh, right. So they're saying you showed the studio area where you took the pictures for these examples. Are those available for library patrons to rent and use?
So the PAR library one is, yes. It was in our digital creation space. You can find out more about our digital creation space if you go to our website. I believe it's under About, that or it's under Locations. And we have one at Haggard, one at Harrington, and one here at PAR. And you can rent out the entire space if you need it, or you can just rent out one of the computers that are in there. We also have a lot of equipment that you can rent out, like headphones, microphones. I believe we are soon going to get lighting sets. But the table, I do not believe, is going to be in there that was used to photograph that binocular set. But you can always bring some of your own supplies if you need to. And I believe, let me think. I'm not sure what Haggard and Harrington have. I believe their spaces are a bit newer than ours, but we are getting new lighting equipment fairly soon, I believe, but don't quote me on that.
I did add a link to our digital creation spaces on our website, so that's directly in the chat there for
fantastic.
everybody. And then we had another question about the left side icons. Could you quickly explain what each item does and which ones you think are the most common or most useful?
Yeah, so this isn't going to be like a super in-depth version of how to go through Photoshop, but I can briefly go over some of them. If you want a more in-depth version of everything that Photoshop does and everything that you can use for Photoshop, at the end of this lesson, I'm going to have a list of LinkedIn Learning videos. LinkedIn Learning is a platform that you'll have available to you through the library if you have a library card. So you can just sign in from our website, use your library card number and PIN to sign in, and then access any of those videos that I show you. But this is going to be your move tool. So it also gives you these fun little graphics that show you everything. So you can move a selection or a layer. A layer is created when you use the lasso tool, and then it'll show up over on this side. So let me show you really fast. So if I select this area and I feather it really fast, and then I do something to it, it should show up over here. It'll normally show up over here as like a little selection. But anyway, this is going to be your marquee tool. So it's going to make a selection in the shape of a rectangle, and that's just to select objects. The lasso tool I already showed you. You can make freehand selections. It's like the marquee tool, but you can do it freehand. Object selection, you can find and select objects, but I believe you have to mark them as objects first. Crop tool, I already showed you. Down here is clone stamp, and you have the history brush tool. So it restores parts of an image to an earlier state. So if you did something to it, it'll go and revert. This is the eraser tool. It changes pixels to the background color or makes them transparent. So if I were to erase this, hold on, let me make it a little bit bigger. Hold on. Oh, it should work, but it would erase it to this white color. This is your text tool, so you can type anything that you put here. Make sure that you make it big enough. I'm going to Control Z that. It's not letting me Control Z. Well, and then this is going to be your path selection. So it selects an entire object. And this will allow you to pan over different parts of the image. So if you crop it, you can move it around, or you can just move it in the space that it's in. I hope that was helpful. There are some other images that I haven't gone over, but like I said, you can learn more about those in the LinkedIn Learning tutorial. Okay. So I already made this more yellow and less blue. So I'm going to get my lasso tool and I'm going to select sort of all the way around here. Like I said, I'm just doing this freehand with a mouse. If you have a Wacom tablet, it's going to make it a lot easier. And a Wacom tablet is just a little tablet that connects to your computer and you can use a pen with. And so you can see the image either on the tablet or on the screen and just be able to more precisely select what you're doing. And you always want to make sure that you reconnect to your origin point with your lasso tool, or else it's going to connect it for you. And then it's going to look a little funky. So I'm going to come over here to color balance. Oh, wait, adjustments. Oh, I deselected it. You always got to make sure it's going to stay in properties, but you have to make sure you go over to adjustments. So let me reselect. Let me go to properties and then reselect. Okay, so now coming over to adjustments, color balance, making it a bit more blue. You see it takes away that yellowish glare. Okay, I'm going to do that again with the inside. Go to adjustments and make it a bit more blue, just a little bit. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. So I would file, export, quick export as PNG. And it'll open up to the last place that you saved. Of course, mine was desktop, so I'm just going to click save, and there it is. You can see it up there at the top. Okay. Got about 15 minutes left. Let me do some more of the watch ones. So this is with the DSLR, and as you can see, it sort of did the whole focusing in on the watch face and blurring out sort of the rest. I'm going to crop this and then resize. Oh, that's not what I want to do. And then sort of refocus this on the center. There we go. See how it's now like perfectly centered in that center box. It's still a 7x5. I can change this to be whatever I want. If you're going to go on platforms like Etsy, if you're selling something, make sure that you follow all of their photo specifications by means of dimensions, by pixel count, and all of that good stuff. So now it's centered. And it's looking a little bit blue to me. So I'm going to just go in and color balance and make it just a slight bit more yellow. Maybe just like 3 more yellow. And of course, if you have a lot of any of these other colors in, you can go green or magenta. You can go red or cyan. It all just depends on what lighting is prevalent in your picture. So I'm going to reset these to 0 and leave that at -6. Okay. Let me see if I can remember. You want to make sure that whenever you're saving your colors, that you're using the right color palette. So if you're printing your images, you're going to want to make sure that it's using these cyan, magenta, yellow colors because that is what prints, that's what your printer uses. But if you're going to use it as a digital image, you're going to want it to be red, green, and blue. So let me see if I can remember how to save the colors on this. Color settings, here we go. So here's RGB, here's CMYK, and this is not actually the right screen. I think that would go more into, you can find out how to do that on the LinkedIn Learning platform as well. But this looks pretty good to me. Actually, let's get rid of some of these harsh shadows. Just gonna use my clone stamp tool. So let's get clone stamp 78. I'm going to Alt click, and then I'm going to fill this in. I don't know why it's not working. Opacity's at 100%. Flow's at 100%. All layers. Yeah. Well, this picture looks pretty good. So I'm going to remember file, export. Export as, if you want to be more specific. And this will tell you, oh, here we go. So you can convert to RGB, or you can deselect this and leave it as CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow. This will tell you the exact size of it, and this will also tell you the exact size of it. If you want a transparent background, you can click transparency, and when you download it as a PNG, it's going to only save this watch face. So you can click export, save. So if I was to put that on to like a Word document, I can make the entire background of this transparent. So I could have text floating around here, and you wouldn't be able to, it would just show the watch. It wouldn't just show the background like as a square. Okay. We've still got some time, so I'm going to open up another one. Let me see what else I have. So this one actually looks pretty good. It's not as blue as the other ones, but it is a little yellow in here. So I'm going to grab the lasso tool. Just lasso that little selection. Go to adjustment. Actually, I'm going to feather it first. So feather 10, and then we're going to come over here into the color balance and make it a bit more blue. There we go. I'm going to increase the brightness on everything just a little bit, just a smidge. See, it's a lot clearer now. Before it was a lot darker like this, and you can definitely see those blue undertones. But I'm just going to bring up the brightness just a little bit to about 18. Okay, and if I wanted to get rid of some of this white space, I can always crop and bring it in just a little bit more. And click that check mark. Now you notice whenever I cropped it, it kept that that 5:7 dimension because I have it selected up here. You can also do this drop down and make a selection based off of what you need it to be. These are our most common ratios, but you can always freehand it and put it in here. Oops, I accidentally clicked this. I'm going to reset it back to the original size. I did the way it was and click check. Now you notice I haven't been closing any of my pictures on the way. So all of them are actually still up here in tabs. And as I select, it's going through the crop tool. So let me go to our move tool, just so it's not selecting everything to be cropped. If you want to close out of them, there's a little X up here along the side. I can just click the X button. It'll ask me if I want to save my changes. I'll do yes, save on my computer. and it'll just save to the spot that it originally was. Maximize compatibility. So this is asking about compatibility. That is compatibility with other versions of Photoshop. So I'm working with Photoshop 2022, which is compatible with most other versions. But if you have an older version of Photoshop, it may not be compatible with your newer versions. So I'm going to leave maximize compatibility on and click OK, and then it closes it out. So I have one less tab up here. For the rest of these, I'm just going to click no, and it'll clear up some of your workspace. If you notice that you're slowing down a little bit, you might want to close out some of these if you don't have enough space on your computer to have them all opened and edited at the same time. There's the original mannequin. Now I'm not going to close out of this because I don't know if that will close out Photoshop for me or not. But you know what? Let's try it. So it's going to close it out into your main screen. So you're going to have to come back and do a new file and go to your, okay, this is actually photos. This is like the Adobe stock. That's what recent is. So these are your saved photos, or you'll find your saved presets. These are all going to be photos that you have as like sample from Adobe. These are also sample from Adobe. So let's come over here. This is saying create. I want to open a new, this is a new file. So like a brand new file that you're creating from scratch. We're going to want to go to open, and then we can see all of our saved pictures. Remember when I said before about exporting? So I saved this one and it looks different because I saved it as a Photoshop file and I didn't export it to PNG. So it's going to look a little different. It's going to have this different icon, and you can only open this in Photoshop or some other Adobe softwares because it's not compatible with like a regular photo viewer. So I'm going to come back over here, maybe open up another one of my watch pictures. And here we go. Okay, we do have about 8 minutes left, so if anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. And then I'm going to wrap this up very soon. I'm just going to do this last picture, and then I'll go to the final screen, and we will all be good to go. Okay, so there's not much that I want to change about this photo, actually. It looks pretty good. It's a little bit dark, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to try exposure this time, though. I'm just going to increase the exposure a little bit. You can see some of those highlights are really bright while some of the lowlights are pretty low still. But I'm just going to increase that exposure. That's a little too bright. I'm starting to get a lot of glares. I'm going to decrease it to about, I think that looks pretty good. I wish I could get my clone stamp tool to work because I could get rid of some of these little blemishes. Well, that seems to be working. Okay. There's some fuzz over here that I wasn't too happy about, so I was just trying to get rid of some of that. And then maybe just cropping out a little bit the bottom half of this. So I'm going to just do clear and then do a free form crop. So it's not in that 5x7 anymore. I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit so it takes out that bottom of the burlap so you only see that. And then I'm just going to zoom in so it's really centered in that photo, and then click check. And so there I have a freeform crop. Now, if you don't like that, you can always come back in and recrop. Just reselect and scooch it over a little bit more. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go back and export. Quick export as PNG. And I'm going to save it to the desktop like I did the other ones. Okay, I'm going to close out of Photoshop. No. I'm going to reopen. my PowerPoint. So here are those resources I was talking about. So there's more specific ones on product photography by Joseph Lin. I can't pronounce that name. Linishek, I think. And Insights on Product Photography by Conrad Eek. And then, of course, that Photoshop Essential Training. That one is 2020. I believe there could be a 2022 one already posted because Photoshop 2022 is the most recent version of Photoshop. You'll just have to search for that on LinkedIn Learning. Of course, we also have Book a Librarian available. If you go to that link or just search for Book a Librarian on our website, it will take you to a form where you can book a librarian, and they usually get back to you within a couple of days, and they are able to help you with more substantial questions that you may have, especially regarding things like this. Now, Book a Librarian is not for hyper-specific questions. Not all of our librarians are experts when it comes to Adobe Photoshop, but we can most likely give you a high-level overview of how to use it or help with any troubleshooting you may have. I'm going to leave this up for just a little bit, just in case anyone wants to take a picture or jot down the LinkedIn Learning names of the videos. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I think that about wraps it up for the day. So thank you for attending our virtual program. You can find more resources at our website or our blog. Thank you so much, everybody.